The Empathic Echo. By Thomas King. Chapter 10. The Weight of Truth. The weight of the architect's escape, the injured state of the phoenix, and the sheer exhaustion clinging to them like a shroud were burdens enough, but as Alara and Zan scrambled through the treacherous, newly formed fissures of the serpent's coil's fortress, another, far more profound upheaval began within Zan. It wasn't a physical tremor, but a seismic shift in his very being, an unraveling of the carefully constructed dam that had held back the torrent of his life. It started subtly, a faint, disorienting echo in the back of his mind, like a forgotten melody struggling to surface. The oppressive darkness of the tunnels, the scent of damp earth, the distant chirping of unseen creatures, these sensory inputs, usually grounding, began to twist and distort, overlaying themselves with phantom impressions. The rough-hewn rock walls flickered, momentarily replaced by the smooth, polished obsidian of a grand hall, now in ruins. The air, once carrying the earthy tang of the wilderness, briefly filled with the acrid smoke of burning wood and something metallic, something that tasted like fear. Then came the images, sharp and unbidden, cutting through the fog of his current reality. He saw it all, not as a detached observer of history, but as a participant, a victim. The time of chaos, a period he had only known through fragmented historical texts, a distant epoch of unimaginable destruction, was no longer a legend. It was his past. He was a child, no older than 7, caught in the maelstrom of collapsing realities. The sky above was not a serene expanse of blue or twilight, but a canvas of tortured, bleeding colors, rent by tears that spewed forth not rain, but raw, unmaking energy. His home, a place he had no conscious memory of, flared into existence before his mind's eye, a structure of elegant, crystalline design, now engulfed in flames. He saw faces, blurred by panic and the swirling chaos, but the expressions were etched into his soul, his parents. They were not distant figures from a forgotten life, but vibrant, loving individuals, their eyes burning with a desperate, fierce determination. He saw them fighting, not against physical invaders, but against the unraveling fabric of existence itself. His mother, her face streaked with soot and tears, held him close, her voice a desperate, urgent whisper against his ear, a language he now understood instinctively, though the words themselves remained just beyond his conscious grasp. His father, a man radiating a quiet strength, was manipulating something, a complex, intricate artifact that pulsed with a light both beautiful and terrifying, a light that seemed to warp and bend the very essence of time around it. The artifact, it was a nexus, a focal point of temporal power. Zan recognized its sigils, its interwoven temporal conduits, with a chilling familiarity. It was the very kind of forbidden magic his captors, the serpent's coil, had been attempting to harness with the phoenix, albeit on a vastly smaller, more controlled scale. But this artifact was ancient, primordial, capable of rewriting epochs. He understood, with a sudden, gut-wrenching clarity, that his parents had been wielders of such power, custodians of its dangerous equilibrium. He saw the inevitable choice they had made. There was no escaping the encroaching void. The fabric of their reality was being irrevocably torn asunder. Their only hope, their only chance to preserve a fragment of their existence, was to sever him from it. He saw his father press his hands against the artifact, a surge of agonizing energy racking his frame. His mother, her eyes locked on his, whispered words that felt like a benediction and a curse, words that promised oblivion and salvation in the same breath. Then, a blinding flash, far more potent than the phoenix's outburst, engulfed him. It wasn't a physical light, but a temporal one, a force that scoured his mind, stripping away memories, severing emotional ties, preserving only the core of his being for a future that was never meant to be. He was being cast adrift, a temporal refugee sent hurtling through the shattered remnants of time, his past sealed away to protect him from the very truth of his existence. He felt the searing pain of his memories being ripped away, the agonizing sensation of his identity being fractured, pieced back together with phantom fragments of a life he had never consciously lived. He was an echo, a whisper of a forgotten age, his true self buried beneath layers of imposed ignorance. The sacrifice was immense, the cost incalculable. His parents had not only given their lives, but they had also given him the ultimate gift and burden, a future built upon the erasure of his past. Alara's touch on his arm, gentle but insistent, broke through the harrowing vision. He blinked, the rough stone of the tunnel reasserting itself, the scent of damp earth grounding him, yet simultaneously feeling alien. His breath came in ragged gasps, his body trembling not from exertion, but from the sheer emotional and existential shock. He looked at Elara, her face etched with concern, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and confusion. He saw the concern, but he also saw how distant he had become, how the torrent of his past had created an impassable chasm between them. "Zan? What is it? You're pale." Elara's voice was a lifeline, but it felt distant, as if it were reaching him from across a vast, temporal gulf. He tried to speak, but his throat was dry, constricted. The words felt too large, too heavy for his tongue. How could he explain that the history he had studied was his own lived experience? That the childhood he never knew was a forgotten nightmare? That his parents, whom he had never consciously known, had died saving him by sacrificing his memories? I remember. He finally managed, his voice a raw, hoarse whisper. Everything. The time of chaos. It wasn't just history. It was me. I was there. Elara's brow furrowed, her concern deepening. You remember? What do you mean you were there? Zan, that was centuries ago. He shook his head, a desperate attempt to clear the lingering phantoms. No. Not centuries. It was my childhood. My home. My parents. The words tumbled out, a jumbled, incoherent stream of rediscovered truth. They sent me away. To survive. They used a temporal artifact. It was forbidden. It erased me. My memories. To protect me. He saw the disbelief warring with the undeniable sincerity in Elara's eyes. She knew him, knew his quiet reserve, his meticulous nature. She had seen his temporal abilities, the subtle, instinctive way he manipulated time, abilities that had always seemed innate, yet unexamined. Now, he understood why. They weren't learned skills. They were echoes of a power he had once wielded, a power inherited from parents who were masters of temporal manipulation. They sacrificed their lives, Zan continued, the realization dawning fully, each word a hammer blow against the fragile edifice of his identity. And they sacrificed my memories. To hide me. To keep me safe from whatever they were fighting. From whatever they were running from. He clenched his fists, the rough stone of the tunnel biting into his palms. I was a child. They saved me, Elara. They saved me by making me forget. The weight of this revelation was crushing. His entire life, the person he believed himself to be, was a carefully constructed illusion, a shield forged from amnesia. His present existence, his motivations, his skills, they were all inextricably linked to this cataclysmic event, to the ultimate sacrifice of his unknown parents. He was not merely a survivor of a historical event, he was a living artifact of it, a testament to a desperate act of preservation. The artifact, he murmured, his mind racing, piecing together the fragmented visions. It was immense. The power, it was like nothing I've ever felt, not even in the Serpent's Coil's laboratories. It wasn't just bending time, it was reweaving it. And they used it to send me forward. To a time when the threat was diminished. Or at least, when I could be hidden. He looked at Elara, his eyes searching hers for understanding, for acceptance. He felt a profound sense of alienation, even from her, his closest companion. This buried past, this fundamental truth of his existence, had been hidden from him for so long, and now that it had surfaced, it felt like he was a stranger in his own skin. My name, he whispered, the very concept suddenly feeling hollow. Is it even truly mine? Or just another echo? Elara reached out, her hand gently covering his. Her touch was warm, grounding, a steady anchor in the swirling chaos of his resurrected past. Zan, she said, her voice soft but firm. Whatever happened, whatever was taken from you, it doesn't change who you are now. You are Zan. The man who stood against the Serpent's Coil. The man who saved the Phoenix. The man who fights for what is right. Her words were a balm, a recognition of his present self, the self he had built and lived, however unknowingly, upon the foundation of his forgotten past. But the knowledge of that foundation, of the immense sacrifice that had made his present possible, was a heavy, immutable truth. He was not just a mage who understood temporal mechanics. He was a child of the time of chaos, a survivor of a world-ending event, a legacy of power and loss. My parents, he mused, a tremor in his voice. They must have been extraordinary. To wield such power. To make such a choice. He thought of the phoenix, its raw power, its ability to endure and regenerate. The artifact his father had used, it felt like a similar, albeit far more destructive force. The serpent's coil sought to control such power. His parents had mastered it, and then used it to protect him. The implications of his heritage were staggering. If his parents were capable of such temporal manipulation, what else was within him? Had some of their latent abilities, some of their innate understanding of time, survived the memory erasure? His own temporal anomalies, the moments where time seemed to bend to his will in subtle, instinctive ways, suddenly made a terrifying, profound sense. They weren't anomalies, they were bloodline. They were inheritance. This changes everything, Elara said, her gaze sweeping over the rough tunnel walls, her mind likely racing with the practical implications of his newfound past. The serpent's coil, they might know. Or suspect. Your abilities, this artifact your parents used, it's the kind of power they crave. Zan nodded, the weight of his heritage pressing down on him. He had always felt a sense of purpose, a drive to fight against the darkness. Now, he understood why. It wasn't just a moral imperative, it was a continuation of a battle his parents had fought and died for. He was a living echo of their struggle, a harbinger of the chaotic past that had shaped him. They were fighting against something, he murmured, the images of the collapsing world vivid in his mind. Something that threatened to unmake reality itself. And they chose to save me, to send me away, rather than let that threat consume everything, including me. The revelation was not just about his past, it was about his future. It meant he was a target, not just for his abilities, but for his very existence. He was a living link to a forbidden power, a child of the time of chaos, a prize that the serpent's coil would undoubtedly seek to exploit. His parents had saved him by erasing his past, but now, that past had returned, bringing with it a terrifying, undeniable truth. He was intrinsically linked to the very cataclysm he had survived, and the echoes of that destruction were now resonating within him, shaping the path he would have to walk. The weight of truth was not just the burden of knowledge, but the profound, terrifying responsibility of a legacy he was only just beginning to understand. The raw, unmaking energy of the time of chaos had not merely stripped Zan of his memories, it had etched a deeper imprint upon his very being. The temporal artifact, his parents' desperate gambit, had not simply erased his past, it had also acted as a conduit, an unintended amplifier for the latent power that flowed through his blood. The images he had witnessed, the visceral understanding of his parents wielding such immense temporal force, were not just historical accounts, they were a testament to his own inherence. His temporal anomalies, those fleeting, instinctive manipulations of time that had always felt like a peculiar quirk, now coalesced into a profound truth. They were echoes of his lineage, whispers of the power that had resided in his mother and father. This wasn't a curse, as he had long suspected his temporal sensitivities to be. It was a legacy. A gift, albeit one born from unimaginable sacrifice. The artifact, pulsing with the raw essence of temporal manipulation, had resonated with the nascent abilities within him, forging them into something more potent, more profound than he had ever dared to imagine. It was as if the act of severing him from his past had, in turn, inextricably linked him to the very fabric of time itself. He was not merely a mage with an affinity for temporal spells, he was a descendant of those who had mastered its arcane currents, a living embodiment of their struggle to preserve reality. The realization settled upon him, heavy and exhilarating. His power was not a tool to be wielded with caution, but a responsibility to be understood with reverence. The intricate dance between magic and time, a delicate equilibrium that had been so violently disrupted during the time of chaos, was now something he could not only perceive but potentially influence. The rifts that scarred the world, the lingering tendrils of that ancient cataclysm, were a constant reminder of the fragility of existence. His newfound understanding suggested a terrifying dichotomy. His power, if wielded with wisdom and control, could be a force for mending, for weaving back the torn threads of reality. But in the hands of ignorance, or worse, malevolence, it could become an instrument of further destruction, widening those very chasms into oblivion. He recalled the images of his father's artifact, a complex, shimmering nexus of temporal energy. It had been designed not for conquest, but for preservation, a tool of profound power used for a singular, desperate purpose, to protect. His parents had been guardians, not destroyers. They had wielded the power of time not to rewrite history for their own gain, but to safeguard its very continuation, even if it meant sacrificing their own lives and severing their own son from their existence. This was the true nature of his inheritance, the burden of immense power coupled with the unwavering imperative of its responsible use. Elara watched him, her eyes tracking the subtle shifts in his demeanor, the newfound luminescence that seemed to emanate from him, not of light, but of a deep, internal understanding. She had seen him grapple with the trauma of his rediscovered past, the profound disorientation that had threatened to consume him. But now, a different kind of strength was taking root within him, a quiet certainty that belied the turmoil of his origins. "San," she began, her voice soft, hesitant. What does this mean? For you? For us?" He turned to her, the chasm that had momentarily separated them beginning to bridge. He saw not just concern in her eyes, but a shared understanding of the stakes. They were in this together, partners forged in the crucible of shared danger and newfound revelations. "It means," Zan began, his voice steady, the tremors of his revelation subsiding into a profound sense of clarity, "that I am not merely a survivor. I am a legacy. My parents, they didn't just fight the chaos. They understood it. They mastered it." He gestured vaguely, as if encompassing the very air around them, the unseen currents of temporal energy that now felt so profoundly familiar. "This power within me, Elara, it's not a random anomaly. It's a birthright. The artifact they used, it didn't just send me away, it infused me with a deeper understanding, a connection to the very flow of time that they themselves possessed." He paused, gathering his thoughts, the sheer magnitude of the revelation still unfolding within him. They were fighting something that threatened to unravel existence itself. And in their final moments they made a choice. Not to abandon me, but to preserve me. To give me a chance to survive, to perhaps one day understand and even mend what they could not. He looked at Elara, his gaze earnest. "The serpent's coil sought to control time, to bend it to their will. My parents sought to protect it, to maintain its balance. And in doing so, they forged me into something that might be capable of continuing that fight." The weight of this truth was immense, a mantle of responsibility he was only just beginning to understand. His own temporal abilities, once a source of unease and confusion, were now illuminated by the brilliant, tragic light of his parents' sacrifice. He saw the intricate workings of magic and time as not separate entities, but as interwoven threads in a cosmic tapestry. His parents had been weavers of this tapestry, and he, their son, was now tasked with learning their craft. "The Phoenix," he mused aloud, his mind already connecting the dots, drawing parallels between the ancient artifact and the creature they had fought so hard to protect. "Its ability to endure, to regenerate, it's a form of temporal resilience, isn't it? A cycle of destruction and rebirth. Perhaps my parents understood that connection. Perhaps that's why they fought so fiercely to save it." The serpent's coil's pursuit of the Phoenix suddenly took on a new dimension. They sought to weaponize its regenerative power, to harness its temporal echoes for their own nefarious ends. But in doing so, they were playing with forces they could not possibly comprehend, forces that my parents had understood and respected. "It's not just about resisting the serpent's coil," Zan continued, his voice growing with conviction. "It's about understanding what they are truly seeking to unleash. If my parents were masters of temporal magic, capable of such an act of preservation, then the threat they faced must have been on an unimaginable scale. A force that could shatter reality itself." He thought of the raw, destructive energy he had witnessed, the tears in the sky, the very essence of existence fraying at the edges. It wasn't just a war, it was an existential threat. He looked down at his hands, flexing his fingers, feeling the subtle hum of power that now resonated within him. It felt different now, less like an untamed force and more like a dormant seed, waiting to be nurtured. He could feel the potential, the vast, uncharted territories of temporal manipulation that lay before him. He could sense the delicate strands of causality, the intricate web of cause and effect that governed the passage of time. "My parents didn't just give me life," he said, a profound sense of awe tinging his voice. "They gave me purpose. They saw the danger, and they ensured that a fragment of their knowledge, a spark of their power, would survive. They sent me forward, not just to escape, but to learn. To grow. To be ready." Elara moved closer, her hand finding his. Her touch was a grounding presence, a reminder of the tangible world, of the present they shared, even as he grappled with the immensity of his past. "And you will be ready, Zan," she said, her voice firm with unwavering belief. "You have always been ready. You have a strength that comes from deep within, a resilience that even the serpent's coil couldn't break. This legacy, it doesn't diminish you. It elevates you." He met her gaze, a faint smile touching his lips. Her faith in him was a bulwark against the overwhelming tide of his newfound knowledge. He was no longer just Zan, the skilled mage, the survivor. He was Zan, the heir to a temporal legacy, a child of the time of chaos, tasked with a mission far grander and more perilous than he had ever imagined. "I understand now," he murmured, the words a quiet vowel. "Why I've always felt this pull, this connection to the flow of time. It wasn't just an affinity, it was an inheritance. And the artifact, it awakened that inheritance." He felt a surge of energy, not of panic or fear, but of focused determination. The serpent's coil sought to exploit the raw power of the phoenix, a shadow of the true temporal forces at play. His parents, however, had wielded that power with grace and purpose, a mastery that he was now destined to explore. The implications were staggering. His unique temporal abilities, the subtle manipulations and instinctive precognitive flashes, were not random occurrences. They were the remnants of his parents' mastery, amplified and preserved by the very artifact that had severed him from his past. He was a living testament to their desperate act, a vessel carrying the echoes of their power and their fight. "This changes everything," he admitted, the words carrying the weight of 1,000 lifetimes. "The serpent's coil might be seeking to replicate what my parents achieved, but they are approaching it with greed and destruction in their hearts. They seek to control time, not to protect it." He felt a profound understanding of the delicate balance that his parents had striven to maintain. The time of chaos was not merely a historical event, it was a warning, a testament to the catastrophic consequences of tampering with forces beyond mortal comprehension. He could feel the threads of causality now, not as abstract concepts, but as tangible pathways, each choice a ripple in the vast ocean of time. His parents had understood this, had navigated these currents with the skill of seasoned mariners. And now he, their son, was being called to the helm. The artifact had not just preserved him, it had prepared him. It had given him the raw material, the innate potential, and now it was up to him to refine it, to learn its intricate language, and to wield it with the same wisdom and courage that his parents had displayed. "They didn't just save me from the chaos," Zan concluded, his voice resonating with a newfound resolve. "They saved me for something. To understand. To mend. To ensure that the echoes of that destruction do not become the future." He looked at Elara, his eyes shining with a quiet, unwavering purpose. The weight of truth was no longer a burden of despair, but the invigorating call to a destiny he was now ready to embrace. His power was not a curse, but a legacy, a beacon of hope forged in the fires of a forgotten past, ready to illuminate the path forward. The air within the oracle's sanctuary hung thick with the scent of ancient incense, and the palpable stillness of ages. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of light that pierced the gloom, illuminating a scene both sparse and profound. At the center, seated upon a low, intricately carved stool, was the oracle, her form swathed in shadowed robes, her face a road-map of time, etched with lines that spoke of countless cycles witnessed. Her eyes, however, held a disconcerting clarity, like polished obsidian reflecting the starlight of distant galaxies. Beside her, Zan and Elara stood, the weight of his recent revelations pressing down on them, a shared secret seeking validation, seeking understanding from a source that transcended mortal reckoning. Zan had recounted his discoveries, the jarring truth of his lineage, the purpose behind his parents' sacrifice, the echo of temporal power now resonating within his very soul. He spoke of the artifact, not as a mere device of escape, but as a conduit, an unintentional amplifier of his inherited abilities. He described the visceral understanding that had bloomed within him, the sudden, overwhelming knowledge that his temporal anomalies were not quirks, but the nascent stirrings of a profound legacy. Elara, her hand clasped tightly in his, had added her own observations, the subtle shifts she had witnessed in him, the burgeoning inner strength that had replaced his confusion and pain. The oracle listened, her head bowed, her ancient hands resting on a smooth, dark stone that pulsed with a faint, internal light. She did not interrupt, her silence more potent than any spoken word, a canvas upon which Zan's tumultuous narrative was painted. When he finally fell silent, the weight of their shared journey settling upon them in the hushed chamber, she raised her head, her obsidian eyes fixing upon Zan. "The threads of destiny are complex, young chronomancer." Her voice was a low rumble, like stones shifting deep within the earth, carrying an echo of the ages she had traversed. "And the tapestry you are woven into is one of extraordinary significance. What you have unearthed within yourself, the echoes of your lineage, the resonance of the temporal artifact, these are not accidents. They are the fulfillment of a prophecy whispered into existence at the dawn of your world's temporal fragility." Zan felt a shiver crawl down his spine, a mixture of awe and trepidation. He had suspected his unique abilities were significant, but the pronouncement of a prophecy, coupled with his newfound understanding of his heritage, felt like stepping onto a precipice. "A prophecy?" he echoed, his voice barely a whisper. "About me?" The oracle's lips curved into a faint, enigmatic smile. "Not merely about you, Zan, but about the very fabric of time you are now beginning to comprehend. The texts, the ancient pronouncements, they spoke not of a simple chosen one, but of a chrono-guardian. A sentinel appointed by the very currents of time itself, destined to safeguard the temporal integrity of this realm." The term itself resonated with a profound sense of purpose, a mantle of responsibility that Zan felt settling upon his shoulders. Chrono-guardian. It was a title that spoke of vigilance, of protection, of an eternal watch over the delicate balance of existence. "A chrono-guardian," he repeated, letting the words roll around his tongue. "But why? What threat requires such a guardian?" "The time of chaos," the oracle stated, her gaze unwavering. "The cataclysm that scarred your world, that ripped holes in the very fabric of existence, was not an act of nature, nor a random surge of uncontrolled magic. It was the direct consequence of temporal magic wielded without understanding, without respect, without the wisdom of balance. It was a symphony of dissonance, a fracturing of reality born from ambition and ignorance." Her words painted a stark picture, confirming Zan's own dawning realization of the destructive potential of temporal forces. He saw again the images of his parents, their desperate struggle against an unfathomable power, a power that had almost consumed everything. "My parents," he began. "They fought against this uncontrolled magic? They were the first chrono-guardians." The oracle confirmed, her voice tinged with a reverence that spoke volumes. "They understood the inherent danger of temporal manipulation. They knew that the forces unleashed during that era threatened not just their present, but all possible futures. They strove to contain it, to mend the tears, to preserve the stream of causality from being irrevocably poisoned." Elara squeezed Zan's hand, her presence a silent anchor. She had witnessed his struggle, his pain, and now, this confirmation of his parents' noble fight, their sacrifice for a cause greater than themselves, brought a flicker of understanding to her eyes. She had always known Zan possessed a unique essence, a resilience that defied explanation. Now, it was being illuminated by the harsh, bright light of truth. "The artifact." Zan pressed, his mind racing, piecing together the fragments of his past with the oracle's pronouncements. It was their way of preparing someone? Of ensuring the lineage continued? Indeed. The oracle nodded, her eyes seeming to bore into his very soul. Their gambit was a desperate act of preservation. To sever you from the temporal nexus that threatened to consume you, to imbue you with the very essence of temporal awareness, a conduit to the power they themselves wielded. They knew that the chaos was not a singular event, but a symptom of a deeper imbalance, a constant threat that would require vigilance for generations to come. You, Zan, are the inheritor of that vigilance. You are the living echo of their struggle, a vessel carrying their knowledge, their power, and their profound understanding of the delicate dance of time. The word chronomancer had felt significant before, a label for his affinity. Now, with the oracle's explanation, it felt like a designation, a calling. He was not just a mage who could manipulate time, he was a guardian, a protector, a weaver of its very threads. The sheer scope of this realization was almost overwhelming, yet strangely. It felt right. It was a purpose that resonated with the deepest parts of his being, a destiny that had been laid out for him before he had even drawn his first breath. But the prophecy. Zan mused aloud, his brow furrowed in thought. You mentioned it spoke of potential repetition. Does this mean the threat is still active? The oracle's gaze grew somber. The ripples of the time of chaos never truly cease. The temporal currents are ever in flux. While your parents managed to avert the immediate annihilation of reality, the seeds of imbalance were sown. The serpent's coil, in their relentless pursuit of power, are constantly seeking to exploit these vulnerabilities, to manipulate the temporal flow for their own selfish ends. They are drawn to the raw, untamed power that your parents sought to control and preserve. So, Alara interjected, her voice tight with concern. They are trying to recreate the time of chaos? Not necessarily recreate, but to harness its destructive potential, the oracle clarified. They seek to bend time to their will, to rewrite history, to seize control of causality itself. They misunderstand the fundamental nature of temporal magic. It is not a force to be dominated, but a current to be navigated, a river whose ebb and flow must be respected. Their ambition blinds them to the catastrophic consequences of their actions, the very same consequences your parents sacrificed everything to prevent. Zan felt a surge of grim determination. He had always known the serpent's coil were a dangerous enemy, but understanding their objective, their misguided pursuit of temporal dominion, solidified the stakes. It wasn't just about the survival of their present, it was about the preservation of all possible futures. His parents had faced this threat, had given their lives to stave off its ultimate manifestation, and now, he was tasked with continuing that fight. The artifact. Zan continued, his mind delving deeper into the intricate tapestry of his lineage and abilities. It didn't just protect me. It woke something within me, didn't it? Beyond mere memory recall. It awakened your inherent connection. The oracle confirmed. Your parents, in their wisdom, understood that raw power without understanding is a recipe for disaster. The artifact was designed not only to shield you but to attune you, to open your senses to the subtle language of temporal energies. The images you witnessed, the flashes of insight, the instinctive manipulations you have experienced, these are not random occurrences. They are the stirrings of a dormant mastery, the echoes of your parents' profound knowledge being reawakened within you. The time of chaos was wound upon time itself, and your parents, through their sacrifice and the artifact, have ensured that a part of its healing resides within you. He felt a deep sense of awe at the complexity of his parents' plan, the sheer foresight required to orchestrate such a profound act of preservation. They had not simply abandoned him, they had strategically equipped him, preparing him for a destiny he was only now beginning to grasp. The weight of their sacrifice, once a source of pain and confusion, was slowly transforming into a powerful motivator, a reminder of the immense responsibility that had been placed upon his young shoulders. So, I am not just a survivor, Zan stated, the words carrying a new weight of understanding. I am a continuation, a living embodiment of their fight. You are the heir to their legacy, the oracle affirmed, her voice resonating with the gravity of her pronouncement. A legacy of guardianship, of balance, of profound respect for the temporal currents. The prophecy foretold not only the danger of uncontrolled temporal magic but also the emergence of one who could potentially mend the rifts, who could stand as a bulwark against the tides of chaos. Alara, sensing the immense shift within Zan, tightened her grip on his hand. She saw the dawning of a new resolve in his eyes, a quiet acceptance of the formidable path that lay before him. The confusion and fear that had often clouded his features were beginning to recede, replaced by a clarity of purpose that was both beautiful and daunting. What does this mean for me, then? Elara asked, her voice steady, though a hint of apprehension underscored her words. She was inextricably linked to Zan's journey, her own fate intertwined with his. The oracle turned her ancient gaze to Elara, a flicker of acknowledgement in their depths. You, Elara, are a grounding force. A reminder of the present, a beacon of steadfast loyalty. The Chronoguardian cannot bear his burden alone. He needs companions who understand the value of what he seeks to protect, who can offer solace and strength when the weight of time threatens to overwhelm him. Your presence beside him is not accidental, it is a vital component of the prophecy's unfolding. The oracle's words offered a sense of comfort and validation to Elara. She had always felt a deep connection to Zan, a shared understanding that transcended words. To know that her role was not incidental, but integral to his destiny, solidified her commitment. She would stand by his side, a steadfast ally in the face of the temporal storms that were surely brewing. The serpent's coil, Zan mused, his thoughts already shifting to the immediate threat. They are seeking to exploit the power of the Phoenix. But if their understanding of temporal magic is so flawed, how could they possibly hope to control such a force? Their understanding is not of control, but of brute force. The oracle explained, her voice laced with a hint of disdain. They see the Phoenix's regenerative properties as a tool of conquest, a means to achieve immortality or to undo their past mistakes. They do not grasp the intricate dance of cyclical time, the inherent balance that the Phoenix embodies. Your parents understood this. They recognized the Phoenix not as a weapon, but as a symbol of temporal resilience, a testament to the enduring nature of existence, even in the face of destruction. Zan felt a thrill of understanding. His parents had fought to protect the Phoenix not because of its raw power, but because of its profound connection to the natural order of time. They had understood its significance as a guardian of cyclical renewal, a creature that represented the very essence of temporal perseverance. The serpent's coil, in their ignorance, were attempting to pervert this sacred balance, to twist a symbol of life and renewal into an instrument of their own ambition. They are playing with forces they cannot comprehend, Zan declared, his voice firm. My parents' sacrifice was to prevent this very scenario. And now, it falls to you to ensure their sacrifice was not in vain, the oracle stated, her gaze unwavering. The prophecy is not a decree, Zan, but a roadmap. It outlines the potential paths, the inherent dangers, and the possibility of redemption. The time of chaos was a stark warning, a testament to what happens when temporal magic is wielded without wisdom. Your emergence signifies not just a potential repetition of that catastrophe, but also an opportunity. An opportunity to mend, to restore balance, to guide the currents of time towards a more stable future. The weight of this possibility settled upon Zan. He was not merely a guardian against destruction, but a potential architect of restoration. The intricate dance of temporal magic, once a source of fear and confusion, now presented itself as a complex language he was destined to learn, a system he was now empowered to influence. His parents had not only armed him with power, they had imbued him with the potential for true mastery. How do I begin? Zan asked, the question a silent plea for guidance. He felt a profound sense of readiness, a deep-seated desire to embrace the path laid out before him. The knowledge of his heritage, the oracle's confirmation, the understanding of the serpent's coil's true aims, it all coalesced into a powerful impetus. You begin by understanding, the oracle replied, her voice a soft yet profound directive. Understand the ebb and flow of time. Understand the delicate threads of causality. Understand that every choice, every action, sends ripples through eternity. Your temporal abilities are not merely tools for manipulation, they are extensions of your awareness, windows into the intricate workings of existence. Study them. Nurture them. Learn to wield them with the same reverence and responsibility that your parents did. She gestured towards the pulsing stone at her side. This nexus holds echoes of the past, fragments of temporal knowledge that your parents sought to preserve. It is a repository of their wisdom, a starting point for your own journey. But remember, Zan, true mastery comes not from raw power, but from understanding. The serpent's coil seeks power. You must seek wisdom. For true guardianship lies not in the ability to control time, but in the wisdom to protect its inherent balance. Zan looked at the stone, feeling its subtle thrum of energy. It was a connection, a tangible link to his parents and their monumental efforts. He felt a sense of deep gratitude, not only for the power that flowed within him but for the purpose that had been so carefully crafted. The oracle's words echoed in his mind, shaping his resolve. He was a chronoguardian, a descendant of those who had faced the abyss and chosen to preserve life. The weight of truth was heavy, but it was also a guiding light, illuminating the path forward, a path of immense challenge and of profound hope. The time of chaos was a specter of the past, but the future, he now understood, was a canvas he was destined to help paint, not with destruction, but with the careful, deliberate strokes of wisdom and preservation. He looked at Ilara, and in her steady gaze, he found the reassurance that he would not walk this path alone. The oracle's pronouncements had not just confirmed his past, they had irrevocably shaped his future, a future where he would stand as a sentinel, a guardian, a chronomancer devoted to the sanctity of time itself. The hushed sanctity of the oracle's sanctuary had dissolved, replaced by the cacophony of a kingdom caught in the throes of uncertainty. News, like wildfire in a drought-stricken forest, had spread with alarming speed. Whispers of Zan's intervention, his defiance of the syndicate's dark machinations, and the near disaster averted had become the currency of taverns, market stalls, and noble courts alike. Each retelling, however, was a variation, a distortion, a reflection of the teller's own fears and hopes. To some, Zan was an unexpected savior, a beacon of hope in a world perpetually teetering on the brink of temporal instability. They spoke of his courage, his uncanny ability to thwart the syndicate's insidious plans, and the undeniable power he wielded. Children, their faces alight with wonder, mimicked his rumored feats, their youthful imaginations painting him as a legend in the making. Ballads were hastily composed, praising the young man who dared to stand against the encroaching shadows, who wrestled with the very fabric of time to protect the innocent. These were the voices of those who had seen the syndicate's malice firsthand, who understood the terrifying implications of their ritual, and who now looked upon Zan with a profound sense of gratitude and awe. They saw him as a shield, a bulwark against the darkness that threatened to consume them all. But for others, the narrative was far more sinister. The very power that others lauded as heroic was, in their eyes, a testament to his inherent danger. The whispers of Zan's temporal anomalies, the unpredictable surges of power that had plagued him, now took on a more ominous hue. These were not the accidental quirks of a gifted individual, but the terrifying harbingers of a force that defied control. How different, they argued, was his unbridled temporal magic from the very forces that had unleashed the time of chaos centuries ago. The stories of his lineage, of his parents' desperate actions, while hinting at a noble purpose, also served to underscore the inherited volatility that coursed through his veins. Fear, a primal and insidious emotion, began to take root. These were the people who remembered the devastation of the past, the scars that still marred the land and the collective psyche, and they saw in Zen not a savior, but a potential echo of that cataclysm. His very existence, they argued, was a temporal paradox, a living embodiment of the uncontrolled forces that had once threatened to unravel reality. They envisioned a future where his power, unchecked, could lead to a new era of devastation, a repetition of the very chaos his parents had died to prevent. This burgeoning division was not confined to hushed conversations. It seeped into the hallowed halls of power, fracturing the fragile alliances that held the kingdom together. Political factions, ever eager to exploit any instability for their own gain, began to coalesce around these disparate sentiments. The more conservative elements, those who clung to the established order and harbored a deep-seated fear of unchecked power, found common ground with those who saw Zan as a threat. They whispered of control, of containment, of the necessity to understand and, if possible, neutralize this volatile new force. Some proposed establishing a royal council dedicated to monitoring temporal anomalies, with Zan as its primary subject. Others, more radical and fearful, advocated for his immediate apprehension, his power to be studied and perhaps even suppressed, lest it fall into the wrong hands or, worse, erupt of its own accord. Conversely, a growing number of influential figures, those who understood the syndicate's true menace and recognized the potential for good in Zan's abilities, rallied to his defense. They saw him as an indispensable ally, a weapon against a far greater evil. These were the pragmatists, the strategists who understood that the syndicate, with its insidious reach and thirst for temporal dominion, was a far more immediate and dangerous threat than a young man still grappling with his inheritance. They argued that Zan's power, while formidable, was also their best hope. They lobbied for his integration into the kingdom's defense, for his abilities to be honed and directed against their common enemy. They saw him as a strategic asset, a vital piece in the complex geopolitical chess game being played out across the land. Within the royal court, the tremors of this societal division were keenly felt. King Theron, a man weary from years of political maneuvering and haunted by the lingering shadows of the past, found himself caught in the crossfire. His advisors were split, their council a cacophony of conflicting fears and ambitions. Lord Valerius, the king's most trusted advisor and a staunch traditionalist, argued vehemently for caution. "Your Majesty," he would implore, his voice laced with concern, "this young man's power is unlike anything we have encountered. While his recent actions may have been beneficial, we cannot overlook the inherent volatility. To embrace him without understanding, without stringent safeguards, would be to invite disaster. He is a spark, sire, and a spark can ignite a conflagration." On the other hand, Lady Eris, a sharp and politically astute noblewoman who had long advocated for a proactive approach to the syndicate's growing influence, saw Zan as a vital component of their strategy. "With all due respect, Lord Valerius," she would counter, her voice calm but firm, "the greater danger lies not in Zan's potential, but in the syndicate's relentless pursuit of temporal control. They are the ones seeking to rewrite history to sow chaos. Zan, for all his raw power, has shown a willingness to protect. To alienate him now, to treat him as a threat rather than an ally, would be a grave miscalculation. We need his unique abilities to counter the syndicate's arcane machinations. He is not a spark to be extinguished, but a flame to be carefully guided." The common folk, caught in the middle of this political tempest, looked to their leaders for guidance, but found only discord. The kingdom, once united in its fear of the syndicate, was now fragmented by differing interpretations of Zan's role. Some began to see the political maneuvering as a reflection of their own anxieties, a confirmation that even those in power were unsure of how to confront the unknown. Others, swayed by the rhetoric of fear or hope, chose their allegiances, their conversations becoming increasingly polarized. In the shadowy corners of the kingdom, the syndicate watched with keen interest. Their agents, adept at sowing discord and exploiting weaknesses, saw the kingdom's division as a golden opportunity. The unrest surrounding Zan, the fear and suspicion he generated, served their purposes perfectly. It distracted the ruling powers, diverting their attention from the syndicate's true objectives. They saw Zan's intervention not as a defeat, but as a valuable lesson. It had revealed the extent of his abilities, the potential he possessed, and the very vulnerabilities he represented. Their failed ritual had inadvertently highlighted the power they sought to control, and now, with Zan as a focal point of public debate, they had a new strategy: to further isolate him, to paint him as a pariah, and to ultimately capture or eliminate him when his perceived threat became too great for the kingdom to bear. The weight of this burgeoning conflict fell heavily on Zan. He had acted instinctively, driven by a desire to protect, to prevent a catastrophe he dimly understood. He had not sought heroism, nor had he desired to become a symbol of division. Now, he found himself at the epicenter of a storm, his every action dissected, his very existence a source of both hope and fear. The oracle's words about his lineage, his destiny as a chrono-guardian, echoed in his mind, but they seemed a distant prophecy compared to the immediate turmoil he had unleashed. He had intervened to prevent chaos, only to find himself at the heart of a different kind of disorder, one born from the very human reactions to power, fear, and the unpredictable nature of time itself. Elara, ever his anchor, felt the shifting sands beneath their feet. She saw the way people's eyes lingered on Zan, a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. She heard the hushed conversations, the conflicting opinions, and the growing unease that permeated the air. "They are afraid, Zan," she said to him one evening, as they sought refuge in a quiet corner of an inn, the din of the common room a stark contrast to the weight of their discussion. "Afraid of what they don't understand. And you are the most powerful unknown they have faced in a long time." Zan nodded, his gaze distant. He had always felt like an outsider, a person marked by an inexplicable power. Now, that feeling was amplified. He was no longer just an anomaly, he was a focal point, a lightning rod for the kingdom's deepest anxieties. I didn't want this, Alara. I saw what they were doing, and I couldn't stand by. And you did right, she reassured him, her hand finding his. But right actions don't always bring simple outcomes. Your parents understood that, didn't they? They made difficult choices, choices that had consequences. His thoughts drifted to the oracle's sanctuary, to the profound revelations about his heritage and the prophecy that now seemed to loom over him. He was a chronoguardian, tasked with safeguarding time itself. But how could he protect time when he was inadvertently creating such discord in the present? The irony was not lost on him. He had acted to prevent temporal chaos, only to become a catalyst for societal fragmentation. The political factions, sensing the opportune moment, began to subtly influence public opinion. Agents provocateurs, hired by Lord Valerius's more fearful allies, spread rumors of Zan's erratic behavior, of close calls where his power had nearly caused accidental harm. They painted him as a ticking time bomb, a danger to the very people he had just saved. Conversely, Lady Eris's faction worked to counter these narratives, highlighting Zan's bravery and the Syndicate's continued threat. They organized discreet public appearances, allowing Zan to be seen, to be perceived as a protector rather than a menace. They encouraged positive press, commissioning artists to depict him as a valiant warrior, a symbol of resilience. The kingdom became a battleground of narratives, with Zan as the unwilling prize. Each faction sought to claim him, to define him, to mold him into a figure that served their own agendas. Those who feared his power sought to control or eliminate him, their rhetoric emphasizing the dangers of unchecked magical ability. Those who recognized the greater threat of the Syndicate saw him as an essential ally, a necessary force to be harnessed. This division bred distrust. Neighbors eyed each other with suspicion, their conversations laced with hushed accusations and veiled judgments. The shared fear of the Syndicate, which had once served as a unifying force, was now being overshadowed by the internal conflict over Zan's perceived role. The kingdom was becoming a fractured mirror, reflecting the anxieties and hopes of its people in 1,000 distorted images. Zan felt the pressure mounting. He was aware of the whispers, the pointed glances, the subtle shifts in demeanor from those who once treated him with casual indifference. He saw the fear in the eyes of some, the admiration in others, and the calculating calculation in still others. It was a dizzying, disorienting experience. He had always striven for balance, for understanding, but now, he was the very embodiment of imbalance in the eyes of many. Alara remained his steadfast companion, a calming presence amidst the growing storm. "We cannot control what others believe, Zan," she told him, her voice gentle but firm, as they prepared to depart the inn. "We can only control our own actions, our own intentions. You acted with courage and a sense of duty. That is what matters. The rest will resolve itself, or we will find a way to navigate it." Her words were a balm to his troubled spirit. He knew she was right. He could not succumb to the weight of public opinion, to the machinations of political factions. He had a destiny to fulfill, a legacy to uphold. The oracle's words echoed again. "You are the heir to their legacy, a legacy of guardianship, of balance, of profound respect for the temporal currents." He had to find a way to embody that legacy, not just in his actions, but in how he navigated this treacherous new landscape. The challenge, however, was immense. He was a young man thrust into a position of immense power and responsibility, a position that was now being debated and scrutinized by an entire kingdom. He was a chronomancer, a chronoguardian, a guardian of time, yet he found himself struggling to understand and control the temporal currents of human perception. The truth of his lineage, the weight of his parents' sacrifice, the ominous pronouncements of the oracle, all of it was now being filtered through the lens of a divided kingdom, a kingdom that was unsure whether to embrace him as a hero or condemn him as a harbinger of doom. His divided loyalties were not just about his own internal struggle, they were becoming a reflection of the kingdom's own fractured soul, a kingdom grappling with the very essence of what it meant to confront the power that lay beyond the veil of ordinary existence. The path ahead was no longer simply about mastering his abilities. It was about navigating the treacherous currents of public opinion, political intrigue, and the deep-seated fears that threatened to tear his world apart, even as he sought to protect it from a far greater, more insidious threat. The weight of the oracle's pronouncements settled upon Zen not as a comforting mantle of destiny, but as a suffocating shroud of responsibility. The sanctuary's ethereal quiet had been a stark contrast to the tempest that now raged within and without him. He carried the truth of his lineage, the legacy of the Chronoguardians, and the terrifying implications of his power. This knowledge, once a fragmented whisper, was now a roaring torrent, threatening to drown him in its immensity. He stood at a precipice, the path ahead shrouded in mist, and the choice before him was stark: retreat into the shadows of fear, or step into the blinding light of his foreordained purpose. Isolation beckoned, a seductive siren song promising respite from the clamor of a kingdom divided. He could, he supposed, vanish, become a ghost in the temporal currents, a specter haunting the edges of existence, unseen and unheard. The fear was a palpable entity, a cold hand that gripped his heart. He saw the fractured reflections of himself in the eyes of Ethelgard's populace, a savior to some, a monster to others, a pawn to the ambitious. Each gaze was a judgment, each whisper a potential accusation. His parents, he knew, had walked a similar path, burdened by a power they struggled to contain, ultimately sacrificing themselves to shield the world from its destructive potential. Was he destined to repeat their tragic narrative? To become a cautionary tale, a testament to the inherent danger of wielding such untamed forces? The Syndicate, their insidious tendrils still reaching, their ambition undimmed, would undoubtedly see him as a prime target. They craved temporal dominion, and a Chronoguardian, even one still grappling with his own abilities, represented both a formidable obstacle and a prize of unimaginable value. To confront them, to actively engage in the cosmic struggle for the integrity of time, felt like a leap into the abyss, armed with little more than a nascent understanding and a history steeped in loss. Yet the alternative gnawed at him with relentless persistence. To embrace the destiny laid out by the Oracle, to accept the mantle of Chronoguardian, was to step directly into the maelstrom. It meant acknowledging that his power, however terrifying, was not a curse to be hidden, but a tool to be honed, a responsibility to be borne. It meant facing the lingering tendrils of chaos, the spectral echoes of past temporal rifts that still scarred the land and the collective memory of Ethelgard. It meant confronting the Shadow Syndicate, not as a reactive force, but as a proactive defender of the temporal weave. And most dauntingly, it meant navigating the treacherous currents of Ethelgard's fractured loyalties, of becoming a unifying force in a kingdom that seemed determined to tear itself apart over his very existence. How could he protect time itself when the present was so deeply fractured? The very concept felt like a cruel jest. He had intervened to prevent a temporal cataclysm, only to inadvertently ignite a societal one. Elara watched him, her gaze a steady anchor in the storm of his contemplation. She saw the turmoil etched onto his features, the internal war waged within his soul. "Zan," she began softly, her voice a balm to his frayed nerves. "You cannot outrun what you are. The Oracle spoke of your lineage, of the duty that binds you. To deny it is to deny a part of yourself, a part that is vital to Ethelgard, and indeed, to the very fabric of time." He turned to her, his eyes clouded with the weight of his dilemma. "But Elara, the fear, it's so potent. And the Syndicate, they are waiting. They are watching. If I embrace this, if I step into the light, I become a beacon for them. A target. And if you retreat," she countered, her hand finding his, a silent testament to her unwavering support, "you leave Ethelgard vulnerable. You leave the Syndicate unopposed. Your parents did not choose to hide, Zan. They chose to act. They chose to protect, even at the ultimate cost. Is their sacrifice to be in vain because the path ahead is fraught with peril?" Her words struck a chord, resonating with the deepest parts of his being. His parents. Their sacrifice was not a reason for him to cower, but a testament to the very courage he needed to summon. They had faced their own demons, their own impossible choices, and they had chosen to fight. They had paid the ultimate price, not for their own salvation, but for the salvation of countless others. Could he truly honor their memory by choosing the path of least resistance, by allowing fear to dictate his actions? The Oracle's chamber, though physically distant, felt like a tangible presence. Her words replayed in his mind, no longer as pronouncements of doom, but as a call to arms. You are the heir to their legacy, a legacy of guardianship, of balance, of profound respect for the temporal currents. Guardianship. Balance. Respect. These were not the words of a destroyer, but of a protector. He was not meant to be a force of chaos, but a bulwark against it. The temporal currents were not his enemy, but the very lifeblood of existence, a delicate symphony that he was now tasked with preserving. The immediate challenge, however, was not the cosmic struggle for temporal integrity, but the earthly reality of Ethelgard's fractured state. The whispers and rumors, fanned by the ambitious and the fearful, had taken root. Lord Valerius's faction, cloaked in the guise of prudence, continued to sow seeds of doubt, painting Zan as an unpredictable force, a potential harbinger of a new era of chaos, mirroring the ancient time of chaos. They spoke of rigorous controls, of absolute containment, their arguments laced with veiled threats and thinly disguised desires to seize and dissect his power. Their narrative played on the deepest fears of the populace, leveraging the historical trauma of past temporal anomalies. They highlighted the volatile nature of his abilities, the sheer, untamed power he wielded, suggesting that such a force was inherently incompatible with the stability of the kingdom. They circulated fabricated accounts of near disasters, of accidental temporal ripples caused by his mere presence, further solidifying the image of a ticking time bomb. Conversely, Lady Eris and her allies worked tirelessly to counter this growing tide of fear. They emphasized the Syndicate's immediate and tangible threat, portraying Zan as their most potent weapon. They orchestrated discreet public appearances, allowing the common folk to see him not as a shadowy figure of mystery, but as a protector, a symbol of hope against the encroaching darkness. Artists were commissioned, their canvases filled with heroic depictions of Zan battling spectral entities, his temporal energy a vibrant, protective shield. These images, disseminated through hushed channels and trusted sources, aimed to cultivate a counter-narrative, one that positioned him as Ethelgard's last, best hope. They sought to remind the populace of the Syndicate's true menace, of their historical attempts to usurp temporal dominion, and of the very real danger they posed to the established order. This battle of narratives had turned the kingdom into a microcosm of Zan's own internal conflict. He was the unwilling focal point, the prize over which these opposing forces vied. Each faction sought to define him, to mold him into a figure that served their own agenda. The fearmongers wanted to control or neutralize him, to harness his power for their own purposes under the guise of safety. The pragmatists saw him as an indispensable asset, a unique weapon to be wielded against a far greater enemy. This constant pressure, this dissection of his very being, was exhausting. He felt like a specimen under a microscope, his every flicker of power, his every hesitant step, scrutinized and interpreted through a prism of pre-existing biases and agendas. It's like they're fighting over a phantom, Zan mused aloud, his voice tinged with a weary frustration as he and Alara walked through the bustling marketplace, the very air thick with rumor and speculation. They argue about what I am, what I represent, without truly knowing me. Without knowing the truth of what I can do, or what I am trying to prevent. Alara squeezed his arm. Their fears are real, Zan. The past has left deep scars. And the Syndicate is adept at exploiting those scars. But you cannot let their interpretations define your path. You know the truth. You know the stakes. He did. He knew the Syndicate's ultimate goal was not merely conquest, but temporal subjugation, the rewriting of history to suit their own dark desires, the eradication of free will by controlling the very flow of events. He had glimpsed the potential future they sought to create, a world devoid of true choice, a meticulously crafted illusion where every action was predetermined. His parents had understood this threat, had dedicated their lives and ultimately their deaths to preventing it. The Oracle had confirmed it, not just through prophecy, but through the tangible evidence of his own abilities, the inherent connection he possessed to the temporal currents. The choice, then, was not truly between fear and courage, or between isolation and engagement. It was between allowing the past to dictate the future, or actively shaping it. It was between succumbing to the echoes of chaos, or becoming a guardian of order. The path of the Chrono Guardian was inherently one of sacrifice, of constant vigilance, of bearing an immense burden for the greater good. His parents had understood this. They had made their choice, and paid the price. Now, it was his turn. He looked at Ilara, her presence a constant source of strength. "I can't retreat, Ilara," he said, the words firm, resolute. The fear had not vanished, but it had receded, replaced by a quiet determination. "Hiding won't protect anyone. It won't stop the syndicate. And it won't honor what my parents did." A gentle smile touched her lips. "I knew you would see it. The choice isn't really a choice, is it?" he continued, a ghost of a wry smile touching his own lips. "It's a responsibility. A burden, perhaps, but one I have to carry." He looked out at the kingdom, at the faces in the crowd, some curious, some wary, some outright hostile. "I have to embrace this. I have to become the Chrono Guardian. Not for them, not to prove them wrong, but because it is what I must do." The path ahead was still obscured, the dangers formidable. He would have to learn to wield his power with greater precision, to understand its nuances, and to control its unpredictable surges. He would need to find allies, those who saw beyond the fear and the political machinations, those who understood the true nature of the threat. He would have to confront the lingering forces of chaos, the residual energies of temporal anomalies that still pulsed beneath the surface of Ethelgard. And he would have to face the Shadow Syndicate, not just in skirmishes, but in a direct confrontation for the very soul of time. But now, the choice was made. The weight of his destiny, once a crushing burden, began to transform. It was still heavy, immensely so, but it was no longer a weight of passive suffering. It was the weight of active purpose, the weight of a guardian ready to stand against the encroaching darkness, to protect the delicate tapestry of time, and to forge a future worthy of his parents' sacrifice. The fractured loyalties of Ethelgard were a formidable obstacle, but perhaps, by embracing his role, by acting with unwavering conviction, he could become the very catalyst for unity the kingdom so desperately needed. The burden of choice had led him to the crossroads of destiny, and he had chosen to walk the path, no matter how perilous.